Okay, rulers, settle down. Ruler School is brought to you by Odyssey Games, where you can go to get pre-orders of all the upcoming Force of Will sets, as well as releases of previous sets after they come out, as well as FowlLibrary.com, a wonderful resource for deck lists, article discussions, and more. Check them out at FowlLibrary.com, as well as these amazing patrons. Special thanks to guest lecturer member Vite Ramen. Thank you for your support. Class is in session. Hey there, rulers, DMO73 here, bringing you another feature match for the week between Tyler Tompkins and his Belial Token Spam versus my Olivia Priciabox. Before we get started, I do want to give you a reminder that, again, Game of Gods is currently available for pre-order, both the set and the starter decks from Odyssey Games. You can check out the description below to get that in. So be sure to check that out to make sure you get product on time for this new cluster and the rotation of Alice Origins. So Tyler's deck is very much turn things sideways, just we're doing it with tokens that are bigger because of Belial. And the Olivia Priciabox deck is all about utility. It is this idea of whatever your opponent plays, we have a counter punch, a counter to it, or some kind of response to it, and then a little 1-2 punch to get it some chip or some value generation, and then we kind of reset back to normal, waiting on our opponent's next turn. We're not very aggressive, we're not very proactive, it's all responsiveness to make it so that we're pretty much just playing on our opponent's turn. For those of you who used to play the Gagia decks, you're used to this kind of idea. So, Pricia, turn 1, Bradstone. This is pretty good because this gives us access to Dolly into Sparklefish if we need to, which is a great opener and sets us up for good color consistency later. Down comes Tyler, sees that first turn Ataractia's Memoria, which is red, white, black, which is pretty good. Ultimately, though, choosing to pass the turn, which for the Olivia deck is great. Give me more will with less threats to have to deal with. Seeing a Deepwood Stone here, and then we pass the turn there. In a similar kind of fashion, we're going to see a Choir of Fallen Angels come down here to get that 4/4 token at the end of my turn so it can attack. It'll be a 6/6 token, which is pretty good because of Belial. The one thing about this deck to kind of realize is, like, the less value you can give it off of the Ystemma, kind of the better it is, which is why something like Dolly is really, really effective for this deck, because it has barrier. So things like Prideful Rule just don't have a target to be able to shoot. Keeping things off the board as much as possible, really only being responsive is really nice. Like, we keep a stemma from being able to generate a lot of value, and then we just kind of out-tempo the game as it goes. So we saw that Dolly off of the God Art. There was no Black Witch or anything to stop us from searching, which felt really great. It got us to bounce the token back to his hand, so we didn't take that damage. Down comes a Burning Rabbit Dash. And in comes that Welser. We can cast him for 2 to put the Resonator side into play. This is, again, that 1-2 punch, right? We're casting him for 2 to put the spell back in his hand, and then we're like, okay, that's great. Now we have a 6/6 body, so we can threaten that damage when we go to his turn. One of the things about Belial is you kind of have to keep pressuring him, especially if he doesn't see those Erythropia stones early, to make him use his God's Arts proactively, so that you can then kind of find your way to chip through for lethal. Welser is great at being able to do that. Magic Stone of the Tides, swinging in for 6, seeing if we're going to get that value. We're going to pop coin here to try to do a Prideful Rule. This is one of those situations where, again, we've made him use his resource, now we're ready to counterpunch and get our value in. Especially since Prideful Rule will also generate the token. If we have a way to be able to answer it, this feels pretty good. We also want to keep it out of his hand as much as possible. So down comes Melfi here. Gets another body on board, draws us a card, does a little bit of cycling. And then we're going to use Fiola to be able to put that Prideful Rule back on the bottom of his hand. Doesn't generate the token. And now we have even more threats on board that he has to be able to kind of answer. We want to shift the tempo pretty early to making Tyler have to spend will on his turn. The more we do this, the better it is for us. Ultimately, he takes the swing from both the Welser and the Dolly, so already half his life gone. The more we can make Tyler have to use will on his turn, the more free we are to do things on our turn, which is when we can, place things like Nightmare Fish or Lightning Passion to really try to push through. This is a situation where I could see a stemma flip here because it has 2 targets, so he can generate, kind of refund himself the will, or kind of refill his hand. You do see he does have that Inferno in hand. This is a pretty good spot for being able to clear things with Inferno. He is going to get to generate some value off of the Stemma by doing it. Proactively using that Stemma God's Art. So this makes a little bit of sense in the fact that because his life's so low, he wants to take advantage of the fact that I've been hitting him. So we're going to get an Inferno here for all 3 modes. Our hand size, I believe, is the same because he has so many cards in his hand, but it is going to set my life down to 1,000 and then also clear that board. He also gets to generate some will because of a Stemma, and so down comes that Burning Rabbit Dash. Each of these tokens is 5/5s. Does take me down to -500 life when he swings, but because he is a Stemma, I can't lose the game. But it is important to track that -500 because the more damage he deals, the further away from negative I get, and if I ever, for any chance, have a way to heal back up, I'd have to heal through all the negative. So now Tyler's game plan, now that he's got me below, is just to try to find a way to either get to stand or turn off his Stemma. So this is a situation where, unfortunately, letting have that Burning Rabbit Dash back in his hand with the Wellseer turned out to kind of bite me a little bit. We're getting his Call from the Depths here to force him to banish 2 things, and the way the tokens work is they have to shoot something when they die, and they have Bane because of Belial. So this was really nice in a sense to be able to say, hey, I'll just pay, you paid 2 to make them, I'll pay 2 to get rid of them and still leave up my will. Now we have that Erythropia coming down here. We're going to see a Judgmented Stemma, probably because he thinks he probably has some way to be able to kill her immediately. Got to try to use Gradius here to turn off Stemma, and in response we're going to go ahead and use Lightning Passion to kill the Stemma so that it won't lose its abilities. And if I'm wrong on that ruling, then I would have lost the game. It's a little bit weird because it's a matter of, like, is that card still that card? Does it lose abilities? What happens here with Gradius? Is it a legal target anymore because it's not on the field? So now really all that we need from Tyler is this Belial needs to flip and die, and then he can replace a Stemma with Stan. So I have to kind of play this weird game of keeping his Belial alive. The weirdness here is now he's Judgmented Belial, so he doesn't actually have access to Belial's God's Art anymore. So based on how things go here, there's a real opportunity for me to just burn him out because he's already used the Stemma God's Art, especially if he taps that Erythropia for anything. So Prideful Fire's coming down to try to kill his own Belial. In response, we're going to go ahead and do Lightning Passion, which will get us to be able to attempt to burn him for 1,000. He cracks the Prideful rule here, or the Stemma token to try to, or sorry, the Erythropia stone to be able to get a new God's Art. And I say, in response to cracking for the Erythropia God Art, just in case, we're going to try to see if we can draw into something off of this Melfi. Make a second Melfi. So the thing is, even if he's at this point in time, because the Belial is dead, and he used this Erythropia Stone to not die, he technically has, he technically can't make stand this turn, so I do have one turn to be able to kind of find my way to lethal, using these Melfies to try to dig a little bit here. Flashing in the Olivia. And so there's a little bit of a misplay here on my part. I forgot that because I didn't leave the Lightning Passion on the chase, I completely forgot that I'd already used the random from Olivia. I don't have a second random here, so I would have had to roll for the randomization for Olivia. It doesn't super matter unless I was like hit the bad thing to return her back to my hand. Because again, like, he's not going to kill me this turn. He has a Belial's God's Art to survive my turn, but like, even if I didn't tap him down here, it'd be the exact same situation, where he still has access to Belial God's Art. He only has one will available, so I literally have one turn clock here because he doesn't have enough will to be able to play replace this MO stand. So I get one turn in this moment to be able to say, hey, maybe I'll get, you know, top deck some of my instant speed burn, like another Lightning Passion or something, force you to God Art during my turn because of the swift like things that are attacking, and then be able to burn you to death on your turn before recovery. But that's all we have. That's literally the only out at this point. And so we see what our top deck is. We confirm for us that we do not have a way to be able to draw any more cards. I believe the draw there was a Fiola. Not going to do us much good there. Confirm that Olivia doesn't draw us a card when she flips. And say go to game 2. Because all that happens is I don't have a way to get through the Belial God's Art here. And he can just use it to prevent the damage, and there's nothing I can do to stop that. So scoop it up and we go to game 2. So in game 2 here, taking the draw feels very comfortable here. We want that extra will. We want the ability to be able to play potentially turn 1 Fiola against certain decks, especially if he's going to try to go for like a pretty aggressive token play. However, him being, you know, a stem of Belial doesn't have any access to will production on turn 1 other than just his 1 stone. So we're probably not going to see that, but still keeping him off of that by taking the coin is pretty good here. Also keeps his hand value generation low, gets our hand value up, so that we can like play this grindier game a lot easier than he can. Down comes that first turn 6 stage stone, and just a pass as expected. Green blue coming in from the Olivia side of things. It's the perfect stone for us to see on 1. You see this token, beginning of a fairy tale generation. Thinking as to whether or not we're going to let him do that. We say that's fine. He did awaken it. Or no, we think about it. We're like, oh, wait, you know what? We're going to steal a card and we're going to get a card off of, prevent you from drawing a card. So we're going to go ahead and Sparkle Fish that. We don't want to deal with that. And we want to put a 7/7 on body right away. Because the other thing is we still have access to Dolly God Art, which is pretty relevant. Choosing who to try to call stone with here. Feeling like there's probably a Prideful Fire down the road. Hits a 6 sage stone, so it doesn't even really matter. Proactive Prideful Reel here to try to generate a token. In response, we're going to use the Dolly God Art to get Dolly and put the Sparklefish back in our hand. So this will still let him get the token, but it won't let him generate any extra value off of it by killing something because of a stemma, which we're totally fine. We can handle a 6/6 token. That's not a big deal. We have bounces for it. We have so much spot removal in this deck, or board wipe removal in this deck. We really just wanted to keep him off the ability to play a second set of tokens. You see he has that Burning Rabbit Dash in hand. If the Prideful Rule had resolved, he could have generated red and then used red and the stone to play Burning Rabbit Dash and swing in for 15 and everything else. The less early aggression we can deal with, the more opportunities we have to make his token generation not do as much, because we have access to things like Pulsing Thunder. Ultimately choosing to just pass. So we have a Virgil there, Swarming Cthulhu, Belial's Rule, Prideful Fire, lots of good cards. Judgmented Belial. Gets those 2 extra tokens. Now his token in the air is swinging for 8. We're actually going to take this, and the reason why is we're going to take this. We're not going to try to respond to it. We're going to take the 8 here because, one, we're going to be able to keep this board clear here, and actually we like the fact that he just drained. He just drained above 2 grand. So now what's going to be the problem is here, he has to not be able to use Prideful Rule. Prideful Rule is now costing him 3, which is great. It means we can play things like this Sparklefish that we're replaying and be safe. Like, we don't have to worry about it being, you know, one shot canceled, get a lot of value off of it. So we feel pretty comfortable here. Now we have 2 Magic Stones of Knowledge, so those are now Seal 3, so we are at a 5 color stones, which is great for the Olivia deck. There's a lot. I mean, the main colors of the deck are blue and green, but it does splash, you know, into black, into white, for things like the Pulsing Thunder and the Call from the Depths. So we're going to bounce one of these tokens. Get it out of there with the dolly. Now we have 3 randomizations. We want to be careful not to clear his board too much proactively, because we don't want to give him too much leeway with the... We don't want to give him too much leeway with Inferno. We swing for 7 and he chooses to take it. It's fine. He goes down to 21. Once again, keeping above that 2 grand range is nice, because it means Prideful Rules in his hand just aren't doing as much. Choir of Angels after draw. So I'll have another token here that we'll be able to swing later. Swings and swings. Say that's fine. We go down to 20. The other reason for this is now we've made it so that Inferno doesn't feel great for losing life loss. We're just trying to do things that the whole purpose of it is to make kind of some of the linchpin cards that can kind of reestablish or restabilize things feel not as great. Burning Rabbit Dash coming in. See, that's fine. Gonna have 3 more tokens, potentially, unless we want to try to stop it. That's where the Pulsing Thunder is going to come in, and you say, look, you've got 6. That's enough. The Bane's going to get to go off, which will then get to shoot shoot my Sparklefish because of the Bane tokens. But it can't hit the dollies, so those will get to stay safe. So we will get to either draw a card or produce some will off of a stemma, but this also means that as a stemma flip isn't going to really do much. Did see he top decked the Gradius there, which is pretty great. Down comes that Swarming Cthulhu. So those are 4-3. They're all 3/3s at this point. So 12 damage represented. Now they could kill the dollies if he wanted, or he could choose to just go face. It'll be interesting to see what he decides to do. So they have swiftness and precision during this turn. Ultimately choosing to go in for 12. We say, you know what, that's fine. Again, we have board clears to be able to keep things clear. You know, even if I take damage, your stemma has to be able to be killed. We already answered the Virgil. It was very strange that we saw the Virgil play so early. It feels like playing the Virgil would be something that you would think to do on the Astema, so that you have like a free way to kill her without having to worry about it. There's probably multiple copies of Virgil in the deck though. Choosing to not swing, mainly because we expected a Belial God's Art there. We want to keep him above at the Prideful Rule mark, and we didn't want him to draw an extra card. Plus the precision is gone now off those tokens, so they can't hurt me. Swings in with the token. We're choosing him to do Call from the Depths. Force him to banish 2. Says, okay, I'll banish 2 Resonators, and then swings in for 3. I see that's fine. I'll go down to 5 and be within Thunder range. So he has that Prideful Rule, so he could definitely Prideful Rule, keep his God's Art safe, and clear off all my dollies. But he also knows that he has access to his Inferno, so he might be waiting to do it until something's a little bit bigger. Judgment to the Stemma coming down here. She doesn't have anything to target, but she is just a very large body. He has to find his way to 5 more damage, and then he can kind of clear the game, because you see he does have that Gradius in his hand to be able to shut off our ability for the turn. End of his turn, we're going to go ahead and cast Pricia's Big Show. This is where the Priciabox element comes in. 1, it lets it fix our hand a lot, and 2, most of the Resonators in this deck are 2 cost or 3 cost, and so Pricia very easily kind of becomes like 4 instant speed sacrificial altars on a body. That's how we're using it in this deck. We've talked about it before in the Teacher's Lounge. The whole kind of point is to just say, hey, I've got a lot of flexibility. As long as there's not a Black Witch, I can turn Pricia into kind of whatever I need her to be, and you get a lot of value off of it. Down comes that Amadeus, so now we are at another 5-color stone, which feels absolutely great. Gonna pay 2. Trying to think kind of what we might be walking into here. We still have to get through the Belial God's Art. We know that we're safe from the Astema God's Art now, so there's no instant speed Infernos at least coming. So we're gonna try to swing in for 4. Down comes the Belial God's Art. So this feels great. We've now forced him to use the Belial God's Art. We're not dead. Astema's going to get to hurt me for a lot, but we have ways to be able to keep that clear. We've essentially pivoted to this game of protect the Astema. We want to be able to grind Tyler out here, and any ways that he's going to try to play to hurt his own Astema outside of a Virgil, which will kill it automatically, we want to stop. We want to make it so that he gets to just keep that J ruler forever, and if that means he generates value, then so be it. That's what he generates. See an awakened beginning of a fairy tale here to draw him another card. So many tokens, so little time. Still no Virgils in that hand though, so he still has to try to find a way to kill me, kill his own Astema here and get to stand. We say, we'll take the 6, that's fine. I'm down to -1. We're not going to try to block. You see, he only has he has Gradius and double Prideful Fire in hand. It costs 2 Prideful Fire to kill Astema as she is now, because his life is totally 900 right now, which feels pretty good. We're going to go ahead and do number 13 to cancel the Gradius, get that out of the board. Swinging at a Dolly. Wondering what he's going to do with that. We're going to say, you know what? That is okay. We're going to let that Dolly get killed. And he gets to potentially draw some other cards. So he's going to get to draw 2 cards here, which is great. Trying to find a way to be able to kill his Astema again without having to rely on those Prideful Fires. Unfortunately, seeing 2 more token generators. I will say Tyler has a little bit of an advantage here in the fact that because I'm down to negative 100 life, I can't kill his Astema, so Pulsing Thunder feels a lot worse. He's going to try to draw even more with Beginning of a Fairy Tale here, Awakened. This is a little bit rough for him because now he has a 6 Sage Stone that's only for Void, which puts us in a pretty good spot. And again, like I said, Prideful Fire is only dealing 900 right now, so it would take literally 2 casts to be able to answer it. We're going to head and do Pricia's Big Show here at the end of his turn. Now we're up to 2, so we can grab 90% of the deck in terms of resonators. Really thinking about whether or not I need to keep cards on top or just try to cast the Prisia this turn, and so it doesn't really matter. Because we only have 5 stones, so only 3 available, casting the Prisia right now doesn't make a ton of sense because all of our cancels are 2 drops. So we need to be able to potentially answer anything that Tyler might be doing to try to kill his Astema. At most, casting 1 more Prisia as Big Show just to be able to get to 3 because it'd leave us with 2 open. That's the thing about this Olivia deck is it takes a lot of thinking because you have to think about every single card that's in your deck and also how you're going to find your lethal. It's the trickiest part. You have to think several turns ahead, which can be pretty insane. Drawing for turn. Pricia's Big Show back in my hand, just for shortcutting there. Should have been in my hand before I drew the card. You'll notice that the Olivia deck isn't playing any 6 Sage Stones. This is because we wanted this deck to feel very comfortable just calling stone every turn. Because we're being so reactive, we always want will available. So the idea of losing 6 Sage, losing color consistency, losing being able to be reactive all for the sake of some potential color consistency just felt unnecessary. So I gotta start trying to find a way to get in pressure here. With no God's Arts available, this is the turn where I can certainly get aggressive in terms of getting some damage in. But there's so many tokens, and I have to leave up will to be able to protect the Astema. I also don't want to give Tyler unnecessary advantage by giving him things that he can shoot on either of our turns to be able to get him more cards in his hand. Ultimately choosing to commit to the Fish of the Demonic World. This is going to get to use a randomization here. I can target up to 3 things non-randomly, including players, and shoot them for some damage. Choosing to shoot the Fallen Angel, the Cthulhu, and him for 1,000 damage each, so it'll go down to 11. Keep in mind, outside of Gradius right now, he has to be able to... Gradius or Charlotte's Light Transformation Magic, he has to find a way to kill Astema, flip Belial, kill Belial, and then he can replace it with Stan. So... thinking about whether or not I need to try to pay anything else this turn. We're going to see a Lightning Passion come down here, doing a second randomization to try to shoot him for 1,000 and take him down to 1, using the second Dolly randomization, so I still have access to the Olivia randomization. Down comes a Prideful Fire here. This is enough to be able to kill the Astema, because I've done that 1,000 damage, so it's going to deal 19. So in response to the Prideful Fire, we're going to go ahead and do a Sparklefish, using the third randomization for the turn to recover my stones. So this is last randomization for the turn, but recovering my stones does give me access to my whole hand of stuff. And this is still before this Prideful Fire is attempting to resolve. So that's fine, it's going to go ahead and recover. Down comes a Fiola to hit the Prideful Fire to put that on the bottom of its deck. The reason why we're doing the Fiola here, which is why it's kind of really important, is because we want that to go to bottom of deck. It has Remnant, so canceling it isn't going to do anything. He's just going to be able to recast it. We want him to lose the card value from his hand and feel like he has one less resource to be able to find his way to lethal. Because of this Prideful Fire, he could use it to kill the Astema right now, and then flip, and if he had anything else to be able to kill his Belial very easily, like it's just one step further. We want him to have to go through our gauntlet of stuff so that we can find our way to lethal. And now that he only has 100 life left, all we need is another Pulsing Thunder, and the game's over. So still during my turn, while he can still generate the value off of it, we are going to see a Prideful Fire shooting the Fiola. Since I've said I've moved to end, we're just going to let him do what he wants. He's going to get to draw some extra cards. Double Kyric's Training Ground. Not the card draw he wanted to see. So before draw on his turn, though, because now we only have a Void Stone and we're kind of tapped out, we have another Pricia, which could go get us any 2-drop from the deck, or any 3-drop or less from the deck, but we just need a 2-drop. So failing to have the Goddard to be able to keep himself safe turns out to be his downfall, because we get another demonic fish. We can shoot a couple of tokens as well as him for 1,000, and we move into game 3. Game 3, Tyler taking the draw. Makes a lot of sense. He won on the draw game 1. Draw not in game 3. Try to take the draw again. First turn. I see a beginning of a fairy tale come down here. See, that's fine. We can accept 4 damage early, or 8 damage early from these 2 tokens. Does have to skip his first recovery phase, though, because he woke it. So calling Stone with a Stemma leaves him completely tapped. He just has the 1 out of Raktia's Memoria. No recovery there. Swings in for a grand total of 8. Takes me down to 32. Oh, I apologize. We tell him to do 1. We are okay with 1, but we're going to stop him from doing the second one when he goes to attack that. We're going to go ahead and do the Dolly Goddard to bounce that token off the board. If you'll find here, he doesn't have his only real good 1-cost cards in this deck are Prideful Rule. There's no token generation for 1, and so because we have Dolly, we don't care about Prideful Rule. We would rather steal his momentum here this way and be able to potentially swing at him for 4. Forcing him to do a Goddard this early would be very, very good for us. So we're going to swing in. He says that's fine. Take another 16. Leaves ourselves with 2 beautiful green-blue will here, which gives us access to pretty much every single one of our instant speed 2-drops to be able to steal some tempo away from him. If he does decide to crash that token into our Dolly, we're pretty okay with it. It is a trade. It's a 1-for-1 trade. He'll get to generate some value off of it later, which is fine. You know, he'll get to draw a card or something like that, but it is still stealing a body from him. So he's going to do it. Thinking about what might be the play here, ways that we can try to use this opportunity to our advantage and force him to tap out or tap more so that we can put a little bit more pressure with some swings on his turn, on our turn. We're going to flash in a Melfi in response to the block, or in response to the declaration of attack. Going to get us I think a green, blue, and draw a card. And then we bounce or attempt to block with the Melfi because that token does not have flying. Down comes the Prideful Rule. Down comes the Sparklefish to cancel the Prideful Rule. Let's try to steal a token off of him here. Block happens. He gets to keep the token. Gets to generate some value with a Stemma. Chooses to generate red. And then makes a black and plays Swarming Cthulhu. Generates 4 tokens here. It makes sense that he would make these tokens because they don't have the ping here. Because if he did make the Burning Rabbit Dash token and I blocked, then he would end up losing his entire board of stuff from the 1 block. So swings in the 1 token, kills the Dolly, and then swings in for the rest for a grand total of an extra 9 damage there, taking me down to 27. But he's tapped out. This gives us a great amount of freedom. And we lost 1 Dolly, but there's more Dollies. We start to target 1 of the Cthulhu tokens, and then we kind of think about it, and we talk about the fact that it no longer has precision. So we actually end up, you'll see us kind of cycle through here and talk about it. We're going to end up bouncing one of the fairy tale tokens, so it's just a little bit less damage. And then we're going to swing in for 7, which is probably going to prompt a God's Art. Because going down below 1,000 when he knows that I have instant speed 1,000 damage burst packets makes a lot of sense for him to try to avoid as much as possible, especially since there's no Aerothropia yet. So we do see that God Art of Belial. Calling Stone with the Stemma, hitting another 6 Adoraktia's Memoria. See a Judgment of Belial here. We'll let him make those tokens. And when he goes to swing, we do have, thankfully, the Thunder Empress's Strike. This is going to do to get us a 2-cost spell, which we can use the Dolly non-randomization to get, which gets us a Pulsing Thunder from the deck, which we can use Olivia to make non-random and blow up everything on his side of the board. So this is great. We just got to cycle for a ton of stuff to get rid of it. If he does do God's Art during our turn to keep himself from surviving, he'll be out of God's Arts, which means that Inferno no longer has Quick Cast. He won't have a way to be able to cast it the same turn that he grabs it, and even then, when he does cast the Inferno, he'll only get 1 mode. So we're in a pretty good spot here. We're pretty high up on life. We're establishing a good amount of pressure. We're gonna be able to go to his turn with Will available to deal with whatever he's got, and he just doesn't have much. He's got that 1 stone. This is the thing that the Olivia deck is kind of designed to do. It's designed to say, like, hey, we're both kind of starved a little bit in the early game. I'm going to make it so when you do things, I get the value off of it rather than you. Swing in 7. Down comes a Prideful Rule. Choosing to do the Welser to put it back in his hand so that we can still try to get in for 7 and say, hey, you want to use your God Art now? He does. Goes down to 16, or he gets to keep himself alive for the turn and gets the Inferno. But hey, we're fine with that. We're threatening a lot of bodies. If he wants to use the Inferno, it takes 2 of his will for the turn to get rid of my 3 things, and he can't do anything else to my life total or my hand size, which feels absolutely great. And we have other cancels that we can play around with if we need to. Stone Call from the Belial. I imagine we potentially see an Stemma flip here. Since the God's Arts are gone, we might as well put some bigger pressure on the board. We do see a Judgmented Stemma coming in here to try to shoot the Welser and the Sparklefish. But we have a response to that. We're going to use our own Sparklefish from hand and use the Dolly randomization here to attempt to recover my stones. Clarifying that using a Gradius would not stop the recovery stone ability because this ability is already on the chase. So seeing if there's any response. You see he has a ton of ways to be able to turn off his Stemma, but my life total is not low enough. He hasn't been able to keep up the early game pressure like he has in previous games, so that he's on an advantage there. So after we've recovered our stones, we're going to go ahead and use the Dolly randomization to do Thunder Empress's Strike to put all resonators of total cost 2 or less back in their owner's hands, which puts all 4 of those guys back in my hand, which means that a Stemma never got to shoot anything, which means that he doesn't get the value off of drawing cards or producing extra will. which feels great. See, he does have that Virgil in hand here if he wants to kill the Astema. But he does know that he's walking into a Welser. We think about casting something at the end of his turn. And we decide, you know what, he's passing the turn, he's going to let us go. We're going to let him go to cleanup. We're not going to let him... We want him to discard these cards out of his hand. We don't want to give him something to be able to target with the Astema now that we've made him waste the Judgment effect. So we'd rather give him as few chances as possible to generate that will from the Astema. So we're going to draw, we're going to recover, because even if Astema swings at us right now, it's only going to deal 12, which is not a big deal. Down comes that Dolly, which can then produce will for the other Dolly. So those Dollies are now reestablished for randomization, kind of contingency, and I get to draw a card off the second one, which feels super great. Seeing if there's anything else we want to do during this turn, you say, you know what, no, that's fine. We're just going to go ahead and pass. A Charlotte coming down here. We say, you know what, now that you're tapped out, we're going to Sparkle Fish that. We're going to cancel it. We don't want you to have any bodies on board. We want to keep you way behind in terms of being able to get us down to 0 life. We want you to have to work for that. And because he's tapped out, so we can't get any value off of a Astema that turn, it makes sense to cancel with the Sparkle Fish. Because now if he wants to try to kill the Sparkle Fish, it's during his turn. So that means he only gets 1 Astema opportunity versus 2. And again, it also means he's tapping will during his turn, which we are totally fine doing. He's going to swing in the air for 12, and we say, yeah, that's fine. We'll go down to 15. No big deal. You still got a ways to go before you can kill us with that Astema. And we do see the Astema kill here for the Virgil. In response to the cast of the Virgil, thankfully we do have that second Sparkle Fish if we really wanted, but we have a little bit more with things that we're trying to do here to keep ourselves safe. Kind of a Welser feels bad because he can recast it, and then he'll be able to just swing through for lethal that way anyway. So we need to answer this late game Virgil in a better way, knowing full well that we might kind of get hosed by a little bit of a but there's a possibility that an Inferno in hand that we know he's gotten earlier could be a bad thing here, but we know it's not instant speed, so we've got some time to be able to play around it. Down comes that Sparkle Fish again. Using our first random for the turn, we're going to be able to recover our stones. That's the one thing about this Olivia deck that is pretty great, is we can generate a lot of will by using Sparkle Fish for that mode, especially when you're sitting on 2 Dollies. Because we're being less proactive, we have a lot of will available, and we have a lot of randomization choices. Usually this deck uses like 1 to 2 randoms per turn, and that's enough. So because we recovered our stones, we could use just one of those wills and cast number 13. Now Tyler starts to scoop it up here, and we say, but the game's not over. You can just go ahead and, because you're like, if you don't have anything that's good in hand, we can just use, you know, he knows that a Inferno's probably not going to go anywhere because I've got the cancel to be able to stop it. His hand's pretty not great. So he said, let's just play it out with the stand. You've got some pretty good things to be able to goof around here with making the stand token and force us both into top deck. That being said, Olivia has kind of some of the most ways to be able to answer that, as well as chump blockers for days. But you know, you might as well try it out. And so we kind of start talking through this idea, which is a good learning lesson here. So the way the stand works is you make him your ruler, and then what happens is you can pay 2 black to God's Art, or pay 2 back to replace, and then his God's Art is 0. And what happens is when the God's Art resolves, everything on my side loses all abilities, everything on both sides that's not stones gets destroyed, everything gets sent from hand to graveyard, everything in the graveyard gets RFG'd. So what you can do is you can abuse the chase here, which Paul is kind of walking him through it from off camera, is you can put an instant speed element on, or even a non-instant speed element on the chase, hold priority, and use the stand token in God's Art. so that you can kind of have something else on field with the stand token, because the stand Goddard will resolve, and then the card that you put on the chase beforehand will resolve. So you see we have this Prideful Rule in hand. So what he can do is, now that the stand's kind of in play, we can use Prideful Rule to shoot the Prideful Rule to attempt to shoot the Sparklefish, so that what'll happen is once the stand clears everything off, then the Prideful Rule will resolve as much as possible, and he'll have the token to go with it. Sure, it's only a 4/4, but that's a flyer. So even if I have chump blockers or something to force him to banish or something like that, he's in a good spot. So we're kind of walking through and explaining exactly how that works, and this is a good opportunity for you guys to see. Ultimately, though, we know we're going to lose our hand, so we might as well just tap and use whatever we got. We're going to use the Welser here to put the Prideful Rule back in his hand now that the Goddard is on the chase. So if he does want to cast it again, the token will still get cleared. So regardless, the Welser essentially served his purpose and became a cancel, and now we get to kind of get rid of everything. So everything gets discarded from both players' hands, everything gets cleared, everything gets RFG'd. Yeah, we're at a bad spot. The thing is, though, as the Olivia player, we have a lot of ways to be able to deal with it. It has Barrier and Eternal, so like obviously Pulsing Thunder isn't it, but Call from the Depths does it. Any Call from the Depths does it, which we have a lot of different ways to get into. There's a lot of things we can do here. Now we start to joke around, but we're like, we're going to steal your Valentina, we're going to steal it. And then we kind of confirm the ruling here that if I steal it with Valentina and he somehow gets a way to force me to banish it, because I'm the controller, I will lose the game. So we're like, wait a minute, that's really stupid. I'm not going to do that. So you're going to see us pick up the Valentina here, just kind of confirming because of the wording of things. I don't want to automatically lose. And my top decks are in a little bit better position because I have the Resonator here, or the J-Ruler, to be able to block his token. And he has so many Ataractias Memorias that a lot of his stones are void. So unless he happens to draw a Prideful Rule, which he could, we feel pretty confident that we're going to be able to survive for a turn. So he's got 4 Void Stones and a 6 Sage Stone. That stone doesn't, that card in hand Prideful Rule doesn't do anything to a J-Ruler. Erythropia can't recharge the Goddard of Stan because he is not a he's a high god. He's not a fallen angel. So we're just going to go ahead and say, yep, you've killed Olivia. We're going to block. That's fine. Go into my turn, see what the top deck is. Hopefully it's something to try to be able to protect the Valentina. That is the biggest piece here. So like a cancel or something. Or a way to force him to banish the stone. We get a light stone here because he only has 1 ruler. But now that we kind of see what's in our hand, which you'll see in a minute, we feel comfortable being able to say, hey, we are going to play the Valentina. We are going to try to steal your token. He says, that's fine, I can't do anything about it. So now we have the 40/40. We're threatening him with his own token. Starts joking around about, hey, I've got Kyric's Training Ground. Don't do that. And we're like, hey, don't do that. We're reminding him that of how exactly Valentina works, where if he has a way to be able to kill Valentina, he'll get his token back. It'll still be tapped. He won't swing at me, but it'll at least keep him alive for a turn. So he goes to play the Prideful Rule to try to kill everything. And we did top deck the Fiola, which will bottom deck the card. We know the other card in his hand isn't going to do anything, so we're just going to swing in with his own token and find the lethal that way. So you guys have it. That is the match. Hope you guys enjoyed. Deck profiles will be up later this week. And until next time, this is DMO73 saying, class dismissed.